We have a bulletin just received.
I've never encountered anything like this world.
Project 1, the visual mashup. First off, in relationship to visual art and related topics, there are two kinds of mashups. One would be a conceptual mashup, which would be a mashup of ideas, or as the name implies, concepts. Examples would be a mashup of Vikings and robots, or Victorians and zombies. In a conceptual mashup, everything in an image might be rendered in the same consistent visual style. And it's the ideas that are mashed together. The idea of a conceptual mashup is interesting, and I don't mind if your project is also a conceptual mashup, but that's not what we're talking about for this project. What we're talking about is the second kind of mashup, a visual mashup. We'll take elements and images from different sources with drastically different origins, styles, and visual appearances, and use digital tools to combine these images to create something new, something cohesive, unified, and unique. The visual mashup, regardless of concept or subject matter, is about what it looks like. So how do you do that successfully? You have a bunch of elements that look really different from each other. Let's say that you have a series of photos of people that you've taken. You've also taken a bunch of close-ups of textures like rust on metal or rough tree bark. You have some drawings you made when you were 5 years old. And you have some product illustrations from the 1800s. How would you put all of those things together and make them into a single image? And how could you possibly make that image into something cohesive and unified so that it works as a successful composition, as opposed to just a random jumble of unrelated images? This is the challenge, the main objective of our first project. Since each pixel in a photograph, for instance, is only one color and one value, it stands to reason that if you change the color and the value of individual pixels, you can change anything into virtually anything else. If you knew what pixels to change to what colors, you could change a landscape into the Mona Lisa. My point in saying this, digital technology is really good at modifying and combining images. If you can think about what you want to do, there's a good chance that you'll be able to figure out how to do it using digital tools. So digital technology is especially adept at creating visual mashups of content. And I think it's safe to say that technology has inspired and encouraged people to create visual mashups of content. Even though digital technology has given us new tools for creating them, the visual mashup existed long before digital technology existed. Visual mashups are subject to those same foundational principles of design and composition as any other work of visual art. So how do you make a visual mashup work effectively? How do you make it good instead of a mess with all these different kinds of things in it? Think of your images as raw material. Anything could be changed in any way according to your needs. And it should be changed if that makes any element work more effectively for your composition. As I said in the first semester digital color class, a shirt shouldn't be blue because that's how you found it. It should be blue because it's the perfect solution, the perfect choice for your design. Modify or replace anything that doesn't support the visual integrity of your work. These works are by artist Matthew Hammond. They are from a series called In Between Places. So in these works you can see there's a lot of different things. We have a predominantly yellow watercolory kind of background, other watercolory elements. We have black and white photographic elements. We have images that are sketched in pencil with graph lines contouring the shapes. So there's a lot of different kinds of things. So how is it that things look like they belong within this series? They're interesting, they're visually connected, and it looks like each of these pieces are a well-conceived, unified composition involving lots of different things. These works are by Victor Cohen. They're from a series called Dark Peculiar Toys, and they sure are. You can see there's lots of really interesting things going on here that are very different from each other. We have pieces of photographic elements, predominantly toys, but also mechanical elements and things that look a little thematically different than the toys and give it kind of a sinister twist when it's combined. We also see vector graphs and things that look like blueprints or charts mixed with the photographic elements. Both of these artists are particularly good at mashups. So, with the permission of these artists, I'm going to use these works as examples to show you how an artist can take images that are very visually different from each other and assemble them into a unified composition. Color. One of the simplest ways that you can unify a composition consisting of many different elements is color. So let's take a look at the color, because the color is a really unifying element for these pieces. So the first thing we see is there's a predominant yellow color and gray values that are mixed in with the yellow color. Then there are secondary elements. It's sort of the primary colors as you learned them in kindergarten, red, blue, and yellow, with the yellow being a predominant visual theme, and then the little red and blue colors being accents or secondary themes that occur. So in these works, again, there are very limited colors in terms of the color palette, and whenever you see colors, they often reoccur throughout the piece. So you can see the red in this piece reoccurs in lots of different places, and you can see that because it reoccurs in lots of different places and is distributed throughout the composition, it helps to become a visual theme rather than a single idea, so it helps to connect everything together, even though the pieces that are red are different than each other. And look at this piece that's primarily gray and orange, but look how the orange spreads a little bit into the gray. So you've kept them separate. The artist has separated the gray and the orange, so the orange is a big bullseye to that kind of scary baby head there. But at the same time, they're integrated. They bleed out a little bit into each other, and you can see in the jawline of the baby that there's some of that gray that's occurring from the background. So we have some secondary ideas of the gray within the orange baby and some secondary ideas of the orange inside the gray background. So that really helps to connect them together. Repetition of other visual themes. Color is just the first step. Look carefully at your individual elements and mentally define their characteristics. You can also write them down. Think of these characteristics as visual themes. Repetition of visual themes builds structure in a work. Take each different visual theme and create a rhythm throughout your piece. Look at the circles in here. Circles are a theme in all of the pieces in this series, and they reoccur. And you can see the circles within the gears, you can see circles within the shadows, you can see circles within the blueprint type lines that are reoccurring. You see repetition of visual themes in Matthew's work. All of this work, you can see that there's areas where things are treated similarly. There are photographic elements and the type of photographic elements, black and white, high contrast. There's calligraphic kind of line work that occurs through all the pieces, and there's messy kind of watercolory works that are kind of patched through and kind of bleed in and out of the other pieces. So those are all things that reoccur through all of these works. And it's not like one idea is random and you happen to see that and it's something that's different and doesn't tie into the rest of the piece. Each of these visual elements or visual ideas reoccur throughout the piece. Transitional elements. Transitional elements, as we are defining them, are areas in your composition usually found at the edges of objects where elements meet. These transitional elements have some of the characteristics of two or more different kinds of visual themes. If you look at some of the details in these works, you can see areas where you see the photographic elements and you see the watercolor elements and you see the drawings, and in areas at the edges of some of these works there's a blending together, and that helps to unify everything. And these pieces are filled with transitional elements where these different visual ideas blend together. Overlap and transparency. Simple overlap of objects helps to anchor them together and carry your eye through the composition, as well as blend together various visual styles. Transparency can also be a powerful tool to unify varied and different visual themes. Overlap and transparency occur abundantly in these works. Just look at lots of different areas and you can see areas where things are transparent and they are overlapping each other and they're coming in and out of each other, and that really helps to integrate everything and look like it belongs together too. It's a great tool to integrate these things, and if it didn't have that transparency and that overlap, these things wouldn't be nearly as unified as they are. Size and emphasis. It's likely that you'll create a composition where not everything is equal in size and visual weight. Size and placement of objects can help draw attention to important parts of your work. In each of these pieces, there can be no doubt that there's a single figure that's the compositional focus of the piece, but there's so much going on in the background areas and integrating with the foreground and things coming in and out of each other in background and foreground. The whole piece is visually interesting without detracting from the main figure. So compositionally, you can see in each of these works there are predominant figures that are the central compositional figure. So other elements are often secondary and smaller and are arranged in a way that directs your eye to the largest element or the focal point. Tools, not rules. It's important to understand that not every one of these techniques has to be used for every mashed up image. You may create a work that functions perfectly with absolutely no transparency, for instance. These suggestions are just tools in the toolbox that you can use as needed. And you may develop a completely different structural system that I haven't discussed here that would be perfect for your particular work. Every piece is different, and it's about how everything works together to form an image as a whole. Legal and ethical use of found images. In this class and for this project in particular, you may find that you wish to incorporate found images into your work. In many instances, this may be perfectly okay, ethically and legally, and in many cases, it may not. Certainly there's a long history of collage where artists have taken various images and arranged them into a new and original composition. There are many other reasons to use found images, such as satire and social commentary. You may use an image or part of an image as raw material and distort it and combine it with other images so that it's completely unrecognizable. There are many images, especially old images, that are in public domain, and they could be used by collage artists as raw materials. Exercise responsibility and good judgment when using found images. Never use images of copyrighted characters except perhaps for satirical purposes. Never use the ideas or compositional designs or stylistic choices of another artist and represent them as your own. This is a very complex issue, but make sure that the work you are creating is wholly original and wholly reliant on your judgment and decisions as an artist. As high school students, you might have been used to just grabbing some clip art and dragging it into your PowerPoint presentation without thinking about it. Now that you're in college as emerging creative professionals and adults, you want to hold yourself to a different standard. A good thing to ask yourself if you are uncertain is, if I became super successful and famous because of this work and money was flowing in, would somebody want to sue me because they feel like they have created a significant part of my work? If the answer is yes, then it's probably not an ethical use of found images. As part of this class, there's a handout available for you with more details on the ethical and legal use of found images. Please read it. If you feel uncertain or apprehensive about found images that you are using, you're welcome to email me your work in progress and get my feedback. It's also worth noting that, although there are significant overlaps, ethical and legal use are two different things. You can create art that has a lot of originality, but is technically violating the law. You can also create work that is technically legal, but not very original. And of course, whenever you work with images that you have created, it eliminates the problem entirely. Your assignment. See your assignment sheet for details, but here are the basics. Create a visual mashup using at least 3 very different and visually unrelated kinds of images. Include pixel-based images, which may include photographs or pixel-based digital drawing or painting. Include vector images created using Adobe Illustrator. Use a third type of images, visually unrelated and different from the style or appearance of the first 2 categories. To clarify, or put it another way, work with at least 3 kinds of images that are visually very different than each other. And this should include some pixel images and some vector images.
Does this mean that I'm only using 3 images?
No, probably not. You're using at least 3 different kinds of images, categories of images, each different than the others. You're likely to combine a lot of individual elements, not just 3. Working with lots of elements will make it easier to create a unified composition. One example of 3 different kinds of images, for instance, would be pixel-based photos, vector drawings, and then hand-drawn images that you've scanned in. Another example would be pixel-based digital painting, ornate vector patterns, and old advertising images in public domain. Assemble in Photoshop. For this assignment, you'll be working with different source materials, but I want you to assemble them in a high-res Photoshop document, which will give you the most flexible environment for modifying your images. Change the elements in your composition in any way necessary to make them work together. Create a high-res document about 11 by 14 inches at 360 pixels per inch in Photoshop, and then drag all of your content into that blank document. Save in the native Photoshop format .psd. If you feel that you need a refresher on Photoshop and Illustrator, I'll send you links to the technical instruction from our first semester digital color class. In the next video, we'll also have a quick video specifically about using Photoshop and Illustrator together, which is really easy and convenient to do. Student solutions. Now, let's look at some student solutions for this assignment. This project may take a lot of work in a lot of different sittings. Keep modifying and tweaking the work. Take a break, then look at it again. What parts are really working? What parts aren't working well? Keep modifying, keep playing. Keep changing things until everything works in support of your composition. Remember to be brave and throw out anything that's not working, even if it's the best part of your work.